All right, everyone, welcome back to the next exciting episode of Midnight Magic Musings. Actually, episode number 11. I am your humble host, tour guide, and servant, Lord Cephas. I am joined, as always, by the star, the giver, the reminder of all things that embarrass me, the Earl of Florida. Earl, how are you this evening?
I'm doing really well.
See, you make me nervous when as you go to the handlebar mustache twist. Sure, I feel very comfortable already as we begin our show. Before we get too deep into this week's topics, we want to take a moment and we want to thank everybody for supporting our brand new show that we launched last weekend, our 2023 Royal Rumble post game show, which we carried on our Combat One Wrestling podcast. It was our very first one. We had no idea how it was going to be, how well it would be received, and we are absolutely humbled, thankful, grateful, gratified, whatever adjective you want to use. We just say thank you. It's been a very big hit for us, and because of that, we're going to do something that we had not planned to do before that, and that is we're going to extend that podcast an additional week. So this Saturday night, WWE presents NXT Vengeance Day. It's their third consecutive Vengeance Day. Call it a pay-per-view, premium live event, streaming on the WWE Network and or Peacock. We are going to cover that this week. The Earl and I will watch the program, and then right after it's over, we will jump online, we will record our podcast, and we will upload it late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Really just depends upon where you are in the world when you'll actually see it. But it will be available this Saturday night and or Sunday morning right here on our Midnight Magic Musings channel. It could go either way. We don't know. Last week, we thought the pay-per-view would only go 3 hours or so. 4.5 hours later, it was still going on. But we covered it, and we're going to do the same thing with the NXT Vengeance Day show this week. Earl, kind of give me an idea. How much fun did you have last week doing that Royal Rumble recap?
It was pleasantly a lot of fun. I was tentatively hesitant. I'm like, oh, it's wrestling. It's been 20 years since I've actually submerged myself into any kind of suplexes, power bombs, figure fours, anything like that. Is the magic gone? Is it going to just be midnight musing? But lo and behold, Combat One proved that, you know what, we can find fun and things that we once enjoyed as kids and youth. We were able to, find some of that magic, and it was fun again. It was the Rumble. I think was the perfect way to start it. Was starting off with the Rumble, kicking it off that way, and you know what, I enjoyed myself. Part of it was the company, I'm sure.
Oh,
Me and
thank you.
myself and I.
Oh, see, it did not have to be like that. Why are you starting so early?
I turned heel.
There's a difference between turning heel and being a heel. It's two different things.
Moving on. So I enjoyed it. And, it was a lot of fun staying up, so Saturday night, Sunday morning, and talking about, reconnecting with everything. So we're definitely looking forward. Combat One. Lord?
So we call it Midnight Magic Musings. That's our flagship show. It's our channel, if you will. That one literally was beyond Midnight Magic Musings. That was about 1:30 in the morning Magic Musings for us here on the East Coast. But I had a tremendous amount of fun doing it. The company, present company included. It was a whole lot. Yeah, go ahead. Take your DAP, as the young people used to say. So it was a lot of fun. We're going to do it again this Saturday night. So be looking for that. We'll also have an announcement on probably Saturday afternoon, just reminding people that it's going to be there late Saturday night, Sunday morning for your listening and viewing pleasure wherever you get our fine podcast. One other thing we have that we're going to do is tomorrow evening on Friday night, we're going to have a companion show drop, a companion to the Midnight Magic Musings channel. We're going to do something a little bit different. On that show, the Earl and I are going to discuss our top 3 characters or properties that have not been represented very well or at all on the DC side, because we're going to begin with DC stuff. We're going to talk about have they not been represented in the DC movieverse or in the Arrowverse on the CW or on HBO Max. So we're going to come up with our top 3. So that's what we're going to do. So be looking for that tomorrow night as well, right here on the Midnight Magic Musings channel. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you will be notified hopefully the algorithm works and you'll be notified when that drops. That will be tomorrow night on Friday evening. Earl, did I get all of the housekeeping matters out of the way?
Hold on. I think we did. So it's time to move on to the first segment that I know you are looking forward to a lot. The big reveal by the Godfather God, and what is going to have in store for. That's a horrible Italian accent. I am so sorry.
I feel like that's an international incident that has now occurred and it's been memorialized on film, which tells you how old we are when I use that term on film. I started to come on here and say we were being taped before a live studio audience as Lady Cephas is down here observing this. Yes, exactly. But I didn't want to do that and date ourselves any more than obviously the old age that we carry on our faces makes us actually look. But the Earl is correct. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to talk some DC. And in fact, I want to spend a good amount of time this show talking DC. But I do want to let everyone know if you did not get the notification, if you did not see it on our Midnight Magic Musings channel, the Earl 2 nights ago dropped his reveal, his commentary on what James Gunn really revealed to reporters, to fans alike, what the slate of DC movies, television shows, and they even talked about things like gaming and animation as well, what that's actually going to look like over the next 8 to 10 years. And Earl, you took about 15 minutes and did a really great job breaking it down just briefly for everybody. Give us just kind of an overview of what, and I will use your term, what Godfather Gunn, because he basically runs DC, what the Godfather said they were looking to do in the weeks, months, and years to come.
Man, the Godfather, the Godfather Gun. As you said, it'll be an 8 to 10 year plan right now with what they have released. We have 10 projects that are newly announced. 5 of them are film. 5 of them will be for the small screen for streaming. Whether that's going to be strictly all of them HBO Max, I believe that's the plan right now. But you never know. Now the segment is actually going to be the DCU Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. That's what's official. So I think right there it kind of leads you into a little bit of where we're going. So the first announcement is a animation. It's called Creature Commandos, and it's going to be I think a 7 or 8 episode series run, and it's going to be more adult oriented from what I understand, leaning toward the hard R, and so they're going to be taking segments from. It's almost like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. They take certain literary figures and they. I was not aware of that when I did my little short review. What do you think of that, Lord? Do you think using something like that is going to be good? Because the other thing, this is animation, and the Godfather Gun said that whoever we get to voice the characters, they want to also portray them in live action should they ever get to that point. So what are your opinions on the project, the actual Commandos, and then your thoughts on actors portraying both on the animated project and then on a potential live action project?
So that's exactly where I wanted to go. So thank you for that segue. I appreciate it. So first and foremost, I'm fascinated by the idea. James Gunn came out swinging. I mean, he said, hey, we're going to build a universe that has movies in it, television / streaming series, gaming, and animation. And oh, by the way, we're going to tie all 4 of them together. If they can pull this off, this could be a massive hit. This could fall on its face or land somewhere in the middle. But if they pull this off and it's the hit they think it can be, all bets are off. Because that would literally change how the superhero genre is being looked at right now. It's really Marvel and DC kind of sits over there on the side and wishes they could be a part at the big kids table. This is
their late. Usually
it is
pretty done, but
sure. I mean, if you compare the animation from the two, it's not even close. You have DC, which does a tremendous amount of very mature subject matter in their animated series versus say Disney, which has the Avengers Secret War series going on right now on Disney XD, or Spidey and his amazing friends on on Disney Junior, which by the way, I do like it and I do watch it. Not ashamed of it. I'm just saying that's where it's airing if anybody's interested. I'm fascinated by this and I'm really excited, and I'll tell you why. So the very first animated series is what, Creature Commandos? I believe that's the term they used. Completely random. So I did a little research, and there is a character that is currently linked to them by the name of GI Robot. I need GI Robot in my life. Though he's gone through several iterations through the comic books. I looked at a picture today. I'm like, that's my man, right? Or my android, right there. I guess I should say, to be more proper. That comes from the weirdness of the mind of James Gunn, not the characters, but the idea to lead with that. And look, that's a bold move, Cotton. That's a dangerous move, because you got to hit out of the gate if it's a very lesser known property. Remember, with Guardians, they had 6 years, 5 years of Marvel movies before they slapped the Marvel name on a property they owned and released it. And trust me, it was a massive risk. A talking walking tree? Are you kidding me? A talking raccoon? I don't like that term. I find that very offensive. A fully green-bodied lady character who is the daughter of the Mad Titan. Not a good person. We saw how the movies turned out and how that story arc went. But anyway, Drax, Star-Lord, all of them together, Mantis eventually, Yondu. On its own, Nebula, on its own, none of it makes any sense realistically. But in the Marvel world that had been created, it worked. The actors and actresses were fantastic. The voice talent was great. And James Gunn is a genius in that particular mold of storytelling. So this is in his wheelhouse. So I'll be completely candid with you. I actually think Creature Commandos is going to be good. I would trust James Gunn on that type of project because that's what he does. He does a little kooky, a little bit out there. More often than not, it hits. And so I'm going to say, for that reason alone, I'm very interested in that. And then seeing how those characters, because he said this, there will be transitions from animation to live action and into gaming and vice versa, all over the place. It's ambitious. Good luck getting actors and actresses who want to do that, because sometimes these animated projects get pushed back for months and years just because of the nature of the production that they undergo. But it's ambitious, and I look forward to seeing it. But you asked my opinion on the first one. That is what I think on the Creature Commandos.
Here's an alternative view to that as well.
Sure.
We know Commandos are going to use some, like looks like Frankenstein, and there might be like a lagoon or a vampire and a mummy, things like that nature, right?
The doctor that delivered Joker's baby, I think, is tied to it as well.
Seriously. Well, it's interesting because we know, and we'll touch on it later when we get to the films. We know that there's going to be different genres that he's going for with some of these. Some of these are going to be fantasy, like sorcery fantasy, high fantasy. Some of these are going to be, straight up superheroes. Some of these are with Elseworlds are going to be detectives and this and that and everything. After looking into this, I was really reminded about, if he manages to do this as an animation form and keep the budget down, with it being animated, and lock in some actors who have a fan base behind them, and it turns out to be very good. Did James Gunn just manage to do what Universal failed to do, and potentially launch their own multiverse of monsters within the DC universe? I was thinking about
it. They have the IPs to do that.
Yeah,
Marvel does too, but Marvel caters more to a broad base, sort of this is how we do stuff. DC starting with a clean slate, and that's really what James Gunn is trying to do now. I will say this: to pull these obscure things into it, here's your opportunity to do something different that's not being done. They had a Disney Plus series right around Halloween, so last October, and that was Werewolf by Night. Watched it, liked it, familiar with the source material, but it wasn't like the source material. So they have a supernatural element there. They just don't focus on it outside of Doctor Strange. And even that sort of homogenized a little bit. Like when you saw Multiverse, it was still a multiverse of madness, still dialed back some. This one has the potential to be bonkers and then all of a sudden be brought into the Superman world because they said all of the characters are going to interact. And so
Yep.
that leads me to a question for you. How do you do this? How do you have a PG-13 Superman or Batman interact with a Peacemaker character who leans more to the R side, or the Authority, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, who their comic books, that material is going to lean more to the R side. So how do you manage that as a studio head, and what James Gunn is kind of biting off here?
Well, it does make you go but I think Suicide Squad managed to kind of drift the line. They were able to pull elements of the the more family friendly hero universe, and like with the first one, which I know was pre James Gunn, obviously,
Yeah.
they had the Batman, the Flash, and I think what was it, a was it Superman, or maybe a brief cameo of him? I know there was Batman and the Flash, where
Mhm.
they interacted with the characters. So they were able to pull some of the family friendly PG-13 characters into a hard R or rated R, and then same thing with the Suicide Squad. They took elements like Viola Davis, who we've seen elsewhere, and pulled her in, and it's not going to be easy, in my opinion.
Mhm.
With Marvel, they pretty much have one rating. So if you're in one of them, you're going to be able to be in just about any of them. Deadpool is going to be your big test, whether they're wanting to test and see if they can conceivably do both.
Mhm.
And I don't know how much of the intermingling you're actually going to have in Deadpool. But with Gunn, you know what? He's proven that he's able to do some action. He's able to do and drama and that family ties and thriller, because that's what I think that's part of the reason that Guardians was so well received. Was it's an action, it's a comic book, it's a tree, and it's a rocket raccoon. I mean, that's crazy, right?
Right.
But the story, they became family in that first one, and I think that was part of the thing that brought them together. So I think Gunn's going to have to weave carefully. The projects are going to have to lean toward whatever the project is. So if Creature Commandos, if you had like a cameo of a Superman, animated, whatever,
Mhm.
Superman in that more hard R or unrated cartoon series and not be tainted, as long as he keeps the spirit of who he is.
Right.
But vice versa, if you have a Superman, like Superman movie, and then you brought in these monsters that helped them lock out some other monsters or whatever, they can be
Mhm.
there, sneaky, sneaky, stinky, whatever they are, but within the confines of the more family friendly film. So I think if you can manage to do both without sacrificing the essence of who the characters are, you can do it.
I think there are ways creatively you can do that, and that is sorry to cut you off.
No,
Uh
that was a long. They can do it.
they can do it. I think in my mind, what you do is you can bring them into a Superman movie, a live action, let's say down the road, or Batman, or whatever, and or Swamp Thing. I don't know how you cross that. Just seems like an obvious crossover. But you basically have them in the scene, and if one of them goes to say something that might be off color that maybe you don't want to hear your children say, as they go to say the word, you cut it to something else.
Yeah.
The adults know what he or she was saying, but they didn't actually say it on screen. But you fill in the wordage, you're filling in the blanks. And so I think they can be very creative in how they do that. I think it's possible. I think someone's got to show how it can be done first, though, before we fully sell out on that idea. One other thing that comes in, and then I guess we'll go into actual breaking down the rest of these, because we have a lot to say. Because I didn't get to rebut, or discuss anything you talked about the other night, so I got to get my shot in here. Using the term Elseworlds, over the moon happy to hear the term Elseworlds thrown out there, because that is a print they've already had. They've had that finally. Somebody gets it. We can do stories in other universes and whatever, right? and just
Yep.
tag that. And then it's just one of these things. It's like buying a what if comic book from Marvel.
Exactly.
That was kind of what Elseworlds was based on. Well, what if this happened over here? What if there were a black Superman? What if Batman was really a girl and it was just Batgirl, not Batman? You can do if that's what you want to do, and I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm saying you can do that, slap Elseworlds on it, and that helps the audience keep it straight. And I think that's the big thing because it's not really a reset, but he did say that the Flash is going to reset everything. And then he clarified and said, but not everything and not everyone gets affected. In other words, Jason Momoa can come back as Aquaman, even though the entire universe has been changed. Maybe he doesn't get changed. Maybe his parent story gets changed. Maybe how he's raised. Same thing with Wonder Woman. You can bring back Gal Gadot, which, by the way, I've heard and read. Look, he's having conversations with Gal Gadot. He's having these kind of discussions with actors that have kind of moved on. He's having discussions with Jason Momoa. How far into those are they? I don't know, but the line of communication isn't closed. So I'm glad you're using Elseworlds. I know they did that a few years ago in the Arrowverse when they first kind of brought Green Arrow, Flash, Superman together, Supergirl. They kind of brought it all together. That was the tagline they used, and I don't know that really hit. That story was a little hot and cold in spots, although it ultimately led to what became of the Green Arrow and really the Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's what it sprung out of. But I'm glad they're doing that. I give them credit. I hear a lot of good stuff coming out of DC. I hear some stuff that makes me nervous. And there's some red flag stuff that go, oh, I just don't think that's good. That's a good idea. But you know what? You got to give them time. And remember, a lot of the movies that are coming out now, still to come, not James Gunn's movies. He didn't sign off on these. So any of the ones that are still coming out, take that with a grain of salt. Those aren't his. Those are holdovers, leftovers, if you will, from a previous regime. Now, do you want to go ahead and look at a few more of these releases as he was talking about?
Yeah.
I know one of them, and I've just got to talk about him because he is the man of the DC universe, and that is Superman Legacy. We're gonna start big. It's go big or go home. And I know it's not Henry Cavill. I do get that, and I do understand that. But I have to ask of you, how big is that going to be for the fan base? Because he said, listen, and he expounded more. He has no beef with Henry Cavill. It's just they're going to use a younger Superman, say 25-ish in that mid-20 range to do that. And you know what? You may bring Henry Cavill back at another point to play an older Superman or an Elseworld Superman. There's nothing that says you can't do that. So the Superman Legacy definitely has me interested. It's not an origin story. He's already established himself as Superman, but how does he deal with being Superman? And by the way, who's the other fellow that was with him talking? I can't think of the fellow's name, but he. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm trying to remember now.
No, he made a specific statement that warms my heart, and I'll explain why. He described Superman as being the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way.
Peter Safran.
There it is. Thank you. He specifically quoted that because that is the legacy of the Superman character. And I was glad to see that they are kind of going back to the roots of that and saying this is who he is. And so for that, I'm like, all right, I like what I'm hearing here. Now, good luck to the poor sucker who gets cast as Superman. That's not gonna be a lot of fun for him, at least right away. There's gonna be a lot. He's gonna have a lot to prove. And that movie comes out in 2 years. That's an awful quick turnaround because this one was not a holdover. This is a James Gunn green lighting. And so it's just going to be put to the test very, very quickly. Earl, I've dominated the conversation. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about Superman Legacy.
Well, I'm going to touch a little bit where you were talking about Gal Gadot potentially returning as Wonder Woman, where I wasn't told no. With Justice League, you have to think Jason Momoa, who plays Aquaman, is 43 years old. You've got Henry Cavill, who obviously was Superman. He's 39, and then Gal Gadot is 37 years old. If you're talking, the plan for Chapter One is 8 to 10 years. So put a decade on all those numbers. You now you have a 53-year-old Jason Moore. You have a almost 50-year-old Wonder Woman and Superman. So when I look at it from that point of view, I understand why he wants to go back, not necessarily all the way to the origin, but to it very early in their career. Because if you get somebody who's say 30, you can get 10 years out of them. Now they're 40, and you still have several more years before they could potentially lay down the mantle. Versus Henry Cavill, who I still love him as an actor, but I understand now why we had to step back from it. So I think initially I was like, no, I want Cavill or Hoagland but now I'm understand why, and so now I can get on board because it's less than 2.5 years, June 11th
Right.
of 2020. And I'm like, that, you still have to cast, you still have to finish writing, which he's doing right now. And then, you're talking, there's a lot of work to hit that number in less than 2.5 years.
I also think that affects the television property right away.
Yeah.
Superman and Lois, or well, rent, don't buy. Unless they slap an Elseworlds designation on
Which they
that,
could.
which they could if they want to extend the life of it. But I would guesstimate that about a year before, you're going to see it announced. If they are granted another season, that may be the last one to kind of end that and have the Superman legacy. And then if you want a Superman-esque character or someone from the Superman movies to appear, you can put in the personnel, the people, the men or the women that you want in those character roles. So, dude, I'm excited about a Superman movie. They're talking about him being hopeful. And I'm like, yes, Superman, he's always picked on, well, he's a Boy Scout. And then others say, well, he's a god amongst men. And I get that. That's true. But to me, the whole thing about Superman is, oh, does he get upset? Yes, he has a pulse, but he is supposed to be a beacon of hope for man to be better than we actually are. That's the Superman that I want to see. That's what I think will bring people to that movie. And hopefully you get repeat customers because that's when the money really starts to come in. So I'm excited about that. So let me move on to another property that has been mentioned. I know I'm going to be jumping around here. This one's next up on my list, lanterns. So I just want to say I heard your recap the other night. When I originally heard it, I was like, oh, okay. Well, I lived through the last Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, and I love Ryan Reynolds to no end. If I could, I would move the family over to Mint Mobile just because he owns it. I would do it. That's how much I love Ryan Reynolds. But I was like, I've seen it, I've done it. The best characterization to me was the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. I got it. Then I started thinking about it because James Gunn made a very odd statement. He said, this is going to be a detective show with two lanterns, Hal Jordan and John Stewart. I was really hoping he'd say John Diggle Stewart, but he did not. But we'll address that another time. I'm not saying this is going to be like True Detective, which the first season is about as good a television series in that genre as you can get. If they can just get a piece of that and make a detective show, it'll be a massive hit, both with fans, but with the critics as well. And they kind of need both of those right now to build up some, what is the term, cachet. What are your thoughts on? And I do know they're going to have a few others. They said kind of sprinkled in there. I know there's one particular one that I'm pulling for, although he probably won't be on there, and that's not who is the squirrel who has a ring. Probably not going to happen. Plus, he was killed off in the comic books during the Darkest Night
Yeah, but
run.
well, this is the real.
Well, he was resurrected as kind of a zombie, but he was killed again, unfortunately. But so will that happen? I don't know. But Earl, what do you think about a Lantern series?
This is also another point. So we've got our first one, the horror monsters, you know. Then you have Superman Legacy, the pinnacle, one of the Trinity of
Yep.
DC. And now we're switching to lanterns, which on when you think of lanterns, you're like, oh, the Green Lanterns, but you don't. We have to think the Green Lantern Corps, they're space cops.
Yep.
And with him talking about it being true detective, esque with you're thinking crime. Maybe there's maybe it's a serialized season with one overarching behind the scene bad. And then also mentioned again, it's a buddy cop thing. So to me, it's like, okay, you've got two different things going, and now we get to lanterns, and now we're talking about it being like Law and Order in space.
Right.
It's like it could have its own a completely different tone shift. It can be darker and grittier because this is about crime and organized crime and intergalactic crime
Yes.
and the cops. So it's a completely different tonal shift they can run with than Superman and the Beacon of Hope and everything. So that's one of the things that has got me wanting to sit up and go, you know what? They could take this a completely different direction and have a complete different theme and tone and setting and so I'm a little excited. And I have to admit, before Gunn announced Lanterns, I could care less about Lanterns. It makes me sad to say, but we've been promised it and been there's the carrot, then we're beat with a stick, and I just I didn't care anymore. And then with Hal and Stewart, live action, buddy cops, them two on Earth, cracking down. And you know what? I'm a little excited now. I'm excited. So they did it to me. They got me excited for this the series, and it's a series on going to be
Mhm.
on HBO. So we'll be able to get to know these two very different background men who went through two completely different things. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you have the Earth precinct basically is what we're talking about. And what are the odds that there'll be some type of murder mystery and ultimately it will involve some type of monster? It just I could see you could fold all this in together, make a
Yep.
nice cohesive story. And so hopefully,
You
and I
know,
want to and I
you
want to I want to emphasize this. I want them to succeed. So I'm trying to look for all the positive. There's still something that make me go, that's gutsy.
and we'll get there for some of the gutsy ones or some of the ones that we're just like
Mhm.
questionable. We'll get there.
So how about the is it Paradise Lost?
Paradise Lost, and I keep thinking of that Milton, Paradise Found, Paradise Lost, but it I'm curious if that has any bearing on the reason they chose that title.
Mhm. So
But
there's
yeah,
there's no guarantee that Wonder Woman will be necessarily the focus
that is
of
correct.
this of the series. In fact, there are comic history of the island and the issues that they've had through the year, well, through the ages, realistically. This one I'm kind of taking a hands-off approach and saying, well, I'll be optimistic, but this one doesn't excite me and move me as much. What is it? Themyscira? Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Um, okay. To me that's Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Can you do all these other things and still have a good story even without her, or if she's a younger version of what Gal Gadot will become? I'm willing to give it a shot, but I'm going to put this more at the bottom of my excitement level. These others at the top. This one is going to kind of slide down the board for me, just a little bit.
Well, I think they have a lot of opportunity here. Um, Obviously, it's been compared to a Game of Thrones style drama,
Mhm.
and and that it takes place before the Wonder Woman films ever take place. I'm curious to see what they do because chapter one is called Gods and Monsters, and already with Creature Commandos, we have some monsters. With Hal Jordan and the Lanterns, we could have some maybe not necessarily literal monsters, but monsters all the same. Now we're getting some gods with it. Well, who says we can't also get Ares?
I wondered about that when you were talking. Yeah.
There is the Greek pantheon is alive and well in the Wonder Woman side of the DC universe. And if we're talking about the founding of Themyscira, and they're talking about politics being a part of it, and power plays and scheming people, uh, why not mention where they come from, the Greek gods and the pantheon, and delve into that and embrace it, because there's a reason it is called Gods and Monsters. And if you have an IP that's about half gods, or a place that existed during the reign of the heyday of the gods, is it a coincidence? I don't think so.
Probably not.
So I think we're, if again, it's a completely different theme. It's now fantasy, high fantasy, with
Right.
mythology and gods and demigods and things like that. So it's it's crazy. We have four completely different areas right now. Off of four projects, we have four different themed identities going on right now. So that's
So
what I think.
so let's look just a couple of these real briefly. I know you have another Batman movie coming out. Uh, it is going to be coming from Matt Reeves. So I assume that will be an Elseworlds title. You
That
have go ahead.
Batman Part Two will be an Elseworlds title, so it'll be completely separate from Guns as a Godfather Guns DC universe.
So you have Aquaman 2 that's coming. You have Shazam 2, which was already in the pipeline. So that's really not anything guns related to, but this one was, set to come out. So it's going to come. What other ones? I know we have Swamp Thing, which they did that series on HBO Max. Then they showed it on CW for like the only season they did. In fact, a friend of mine was actually an extra in one of the scenes there because it was filmed in North Carolina when I was there. So thought that was really cool. Kind of funny they're doing that quick of a reboot. I wonder if maybe you know Gunn
But is
doesn't.
it?
Well, I think Gunn kind of sees Swamp Thing as an IP that has been ignored for a long time. There was a 90s cartoon on Fox Kids. For those who don't know, there was a time where Saturday morning cartoons were not just on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. They actually had them on actual terrestrial television. They
You
did
either
this.
watched it or you missed it.
Yeah. Or wait till the summer and hope they reran it, and they probably weren't going to
Okay.
do that. You had the Swamp Thing series that was on USA in 90, 91, 92. I believe it ran for 3 seasons. I actually liked it. Check it out if you haven't. I thought it was pretty good for the time in which it was in. By the way, random fact, Dick Durock, who played the Swamp Thing in the original Swamp Thing movies in the 80s, reprised his role as Swamp Thing again. So just a cool little thing they did there, but yet I digress. I'm looking forward to Swamp Thing because I have always been a fan of Alec Holland and the Swamp Thing character. Any thoughts on Swamp Thing and what they may or may not be doing with it?
Just what you mentioned is the fact that we just had Swamp Thing, what, 2 years ago on TV, HBO Max,
Yeah,
somewhere,
somewhere in there. Yeah.
and it was done by James Wan, and it was a horror esque style. We're going right back to Swamp Thing horror. So I think that could tie in. Swamp Thing could tie in with the first one we're going to talk about, Creature Commandos.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
I think that's a perfect tie-in.
and it's another horror, because he specifically said horror for Swamp Thing. So it's a completely different genre than the fantasy and the Beacon of Hope Superman, and it's showing the diversity. And maybe he's putting a lot of prongs in the fire, or
Yeah.
maybe he has a mad master Godfather Gun universe planned. So yeah,
If he pulls this off, and I hold to this, if Kevin Feige had retired at the end of Endgame, we would we would be erecting statues to him for what Marvel accomplished then to that point. And then phase four, it's just it's what it is. But
yeah,
that was a solid line and a solid shot
yeah.
overall. If Gunn pulls this off, watch me. Feige, that'll be darn impressive if you can pull that off in the age in which we live. Remember when Disney started, eh, there was no anticipation of a Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was just, can we get Iron Man done? Will anybody fund it? And then will anybody go see it? So we can pay back the loan that we took out to make this movie. And of course, history tells us it was a great idea. It paid off handsomely. This is going to be really fascinating to see how they play this out. What were some of the other releases they talked about? I know Flash is one of them. They're going to do kind of a Flashpoint, although it's not Flashpoint like the comics or like the one they tried to do in the TV series, but it is sort of Flashpoint. It's going to be interesting to see if Ezra can make bail in time to be at the premiere. Sorry, couldn't hold it in.
It's interesting to see how this soft reboot is going to work. And my thing is, I'm like, Mr. Gunn said that this is one of the best movies he's seen. So if I see this movie and I am less than happy with it, I'm blaming the Godfather gun. It's going to make me question. So why would you say so? What? Tell me, if you were the Godfather, James Gunn, and in the situation where you now have this 8 to 10 years, chapter one, you're in charge of it all, and why would you say this movie that's already has so many issues going on with it, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, post, pre-production, all the whole 9 yards, why would you go on record and say, this is one of the best things I've seen? Why would you risk that?
Either he must know something that the rest of us don't know, but we'll find out when the movie comes out. There's a lot hinging on this movie. This is your linchpin to reset this, soft reboot this, leave this alone over here. Whatever it touches in the DC universe, it all hinges on this. If this movie is not a wickedly huge success, both financially, and I'm not even going to say critically, I'm going to say from the fan perspective, you got to get enough to buy in, or you're going to be behind the 8 ball from the beginning. And so, you know what?
If people don't see this movie, then you're going to have to explain your soft reboot in every one of your PIs after this. You have to be seen, so you don't have to go, and previously in the DCUE or DCEU,
right.
And now we are the DCU under Godfather Gun. You can't do that for every single one of these new projects. You have to hit this. You can't pop fly.
No.
You have to, and I don't know.
That's a great analogy. I mean, look, we're happy about a lot of this stuff, but some of the stuff I'm like, well, so here's my take always. I want superhero movies to last the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a nerd and that's what I like. However, I recognize if you turn out flop after flop after flop, and I'm not saying they have, I'm just saying if that is the perception, then it becomes reality. Whether you made money on some of those movies or not, doesn't matter. And that's something that one day Disney, Marvel's going to have to address is, well, what's our stuff doing? And I really feel like DC is in a chance two things. One, to actually get themselves on the track they should have been on all along. Maybe hear me out. Maybe they can actually become, over time, start to push Marvel a little bit. And to that point, James Gunn said something that I think is very, very interesting, and that is he had a bit of a tirade where he talked about, we will not be shooting movies that don't have a completed script. And he went off on this, and they're like, and people are like, oh, well, it was a veiled shot. I don't think it was a veiled shot at all. I think he meant what he said. And I'll take it one step further. The only reason he did Guardians 3, my opinion, and the Christmas special was because of his relationship with the cast, the crew, because you get out and say that, boom. Mm-hmm. And so just the very fact that he went back and did that, I think speaks a lot about who he is and the relationships he has. I don't think he was veiled anything. I think he was being honest with the question that was asked, and he gave his opinion. and
Yeah.
the chips are falling. I'm not saying there needs to be animosity between the two brands. There really don't.
Yeah.
But I thought it's very interesting that when asked, he very honestly answered how he felt. And we know from stories that have leaked out, they have a real thing about at the Marvel side of, everybody does reshoots.
Yeah.
But filming stuff when things aren't completely scripted, i.e., Blade, which has disappeared in a black hole, maybe never to be seen again. We know that with Doctor Strange 2, the Multiverse of Madness, most of that was completely redone.
Yeah.
After it was written, it was completely redone. So if you liked it, hey, the redoing worked. If you didn't like it, well, we'll never know what the original was. And so Gunn had a point in what he was saying, what he was doing. So it's really interesting. Were there any other series that dropped that we need to discuss? I think that's most of everything.
The short, we have a Waller coming with a
That's
return
right.
of Cephas. There's not a whole lot talked about it, but the series is called Waller, so she's the focal point. We do know that there will be some Peacemakers characters crossing over, but for me, I don't particularly care for the character of Waller. So for me, this doesn't excite me at all. But I don't like the character.
Well, first of all, you will not be assigned to the Suicide Squad with that type of attitude. Number one. Number two,
maybe I will.
there might be something implanted somewhere. That's true. Here's what's interesting to me. I'd love to get your opinion on this as we're kind of winding this topic down. A lot of the stuff Gunn announced has that Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. And I think in that vibe, he's good.
Yeah.
When it comes to Superman, I really hope that he's able to elevate not the character, because I think the character is elevated, but elevate the story and give the actors and the ability to emote and really imbibe the characters and then portray them on the screen. But again, for that, I'm going to be very optimistic that he'll surround himself with the people who can help him get it done. That's what a good leader does. You don't have to know everything. You don't want to know everything.
That's what you said. It's about the story, the story, the story. The superheroes are secondary that support the story.
Right.
So, he's a storyteller. He's proven that he can do it well. So we have Waller. It could be they could change the genre, go to a Nick Fury spy kind of thriller. We'll see. I just not that excited about the particular character. We've got a movie called The Authority coming out. That's another hero. Again, I'm not greatly familiar with it. I know that they say they're not good guys, they're not bad guys, they're the gray hats. So Vigilante, the team of Vigilantes, maybe Suicide Squad-esque. I mean, for me, I'm waiting to see before I have any opinion on this. So do you have anything you want to add before we hit the last?
Sure. So they are originally they're from the Image side of the world, but they became the Wildcat imprint from DC. Interesting. Did they go over there and pull from that? I kind of like that. Number one. Number two, reading the history and understanding, it's going to be an R-rated. It's got to be an R-rated series. I just don't see it going any other way. So I'll reserve judgment on it. We'll just see how that works. I prefer a little bit more of a family-friendly program. But again, I'm open to that. The one thing is they've hired a very interesting crew of writers. There were writers from Moon Knight. Or honestly, probably should be a disqualification. However, they got through that particular thing. They have some of the writers who worked on Batgirl, the movie that they literally wiped away, that had been shot and was basically ready to go. And actually, if it's to be believed, a lot of reports have come out and said it actually tested better with audiences than the Flash movie. So to me, that's interesting. It's all
we don't want competition.
It's all superfluous and right. It's all anecdotal until we actually see. Well, we'll see the Flash movie, not so much the other movie that they canceled. But man, but you know what? Isn't it good to have some positive things to say about DC? when oftentimes they're just forgotten, ignored, or beaten up, or it's just Snyderverse or Justice League this or that. Look, we actually have real positive things to discuss and a few things that are going to keep us talking for a while till they come out, and then we'll be talking a whole lot more about it. In fact, stay tuned tomorrow night. We'll have a very quick update on our three individuals or teams or characters from the DC universe from the comic side that maybe haven't had the type of big screen or small screen representation that they should. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that is NBC. They are a terrestrial station. They own Peacock. A lot of people subscribe to that. Thank you, Yellowstone, for the 5 seasons that are on there. It keeps people subscribed. WWE Network is on it. Tons of reasons to do it. Poker Face is on it. I know you have a little bit different view on that show that I did. Of course, you didn't make it past the first 30 minutes, but there were extenuating circumstances, i.e. children, that wouldn't allow you to watch it. NBC did something very interesting this week. They're always doing cancellations and renewals. They did something very interesting with a show called La Brea. I'm a big fan of La Brea. Was the first season. I think it's a fascinating concept. Little uneven here in season 2. They just came out of their mid-season finale. They came back this week with 2 episodes. They've got 4 left on the season. NBC announced this week that they were renewing La Brea for a 3rd season, and then promptly canceled them at the same time. Thought that was a little bit strange. Had to do a little bit more digging. And basically, the idea is that there's a writer's strike looming. And it's not just going to affect NBC. It's going to affect all the broadcast stations, all the streaming services. Potentially, this can be in effect, which would delay production, shooting, and in the fall, a lot of the shows that are expected to come back and the new shows that are expected to debut. Remember, this show is shot in Australia specifically. So they renewed and canceled at the same time. What they did is they said, okay, you have a 10-episode order. That's the contract with the actors and actresses. Here's what we'll do. If you'll knock it down to 6 episodes so we can get it shot, we'll release you all from your contract. You're free to go to other projects. And every actor and actress on the show signed off on that. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad show and like, we want out. I think it's more of this has gone as far as they're going to let us go. Let's get what we can and then move on to something else. We saw The Blacklist. It was announced this week. That show has lived on life support the last 3 seasons, maybe. Big fan of Raymond Reddington or whomever he really is, but we may never really fully understand that. But this week it was announced they will be canceled. In fact, their new season hasn't even aired yet. It airs the last week of February that season 10 begins, and it was already announced as being canceled. So hopefully they get an opportunity to wrap that up. We've seen some more venerable series. NCIS Los Angeles, after 14 seasons, is getting the axe at the end of the year. So I wonder, though, if there's a looming writer strike, does that help some of the shows that were kind of on the cut line? We're probably not going to bring them back. If all of a sudden you need content, might that save some shows, maybe even most at the CW? No, I don't mean to pick on them, but they have whacked a lot of shows and whatnot. What do you think about that? Do you think you'll see more creative contracting going forward?
Well, for me, if I was over there, which I'm not, so I can't, give you 100% what's going to happen. But if I knew a writer's strike was looming, I would do some of the shows that are getting canceled now because of canceling. You want to keep something that's familiar so that when the writer's strike is over, you'll have new stuff coming out. But you want to have at least some things that are familiar because people like familiar. Whether it's food, family, friends, a TV show that you turn on that you watch something familiar. They like what is familiar. So if you have something that gets views, doesn't cost a lot of money to produce, I would be like, why don't we just cut the season in half, like what they're doing in La Brea, and but instead of canceling it, maybe give it a proper ending, but leave it open for you to continue. Because people will tune in to watch something that they are familiar with rather than everything. Monday night, what are we watching? We don't know. We haven't seen this before. Tuesday night, what are we watching? I don't know. What is this? Wednesday night, what are we watching? I don't know.
Right.
There's, if you got to a night where you're like, hey, remember these guys? That wasn't a bad show. We watched it every once in a while. Let's tune in. So I would use some of what's familiar, but then you would also, after a writer strike, that there's going to be, you're saving some money. So you want to have a lot of new shows because new roles, new actors, new writers, everything's going to be lower priced, and bringing back something, like Raymond Reddington,
Mhm.
Blackwell season 10, season 11 is going to cost more than it does for a new show. So for me, I'd have to let go of, Raymond Reddington, who the real reason he's leaving is he's a cybernetic organism. He's a flesh over vibranium exoskeleton.
A,
He has
a nice callback to Ultron. Go ahead.
So I mean, I see both sides. It's all about money though, and keeping audiences tuned into your station because you'll want something that people are familiar with to lead into something that you is cheaper, but you think can hook people. So you need some familiarity, but you also want new, but you can't afford to lose people in this war of the streaming.
Well, that's interesting because, a lot of these shows survive off of the bump of DVRs, 3-day viewing, 5-day viewing, 7-day plus viewing, how they calculate those in. Interestingly enough, the Blacklist does not get as much of a bump as several other shows. And I think that's probably why it put it more towards the lower end. All right. Our last topic comes from the House of Mouse. That's right, Disney. We got a few things to discuss here, and then we'll sign off for the evening. First, we want to give it up for Avatar 2, Way of the Water, or Avatar Way of the Water, as my youngest corrected me the other day when she went to see it. There is no 2 involved. Again, 7 consecutive weeks at the box office as the #1 movie. It is impressive. Again, we talked about last week, not exactly a murderer's row competition, but still, someone's got to win, and they've certainly done that. What did you say? They had a very paltry. How much did they make last weekend? Was it 199 million?
And yeah, they're just scraping by.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know how they're going to make a profit the
how
rest of the but
how embarrassing.
but you do have 80 for Brady, which is a movie coming out
Mhm.
that I watched the trailer and
It's cute.
it's cute. I'm not the demographic for it. I don't have time to watch football, professional football these days, and while I do love me Sally Field, it's just not my demographic anymore. But then next to it is also Knock at the Cabin, which is M. Night Shyamalan's returning with a horror movie, and we know Dave Bautista's in it, and
Yep.
we know there's something going on if you've seen the trailer.
That's a very scary trailer. I saw it this week. I'm like, oh, I might need to take one of the dogs with me and hold one of them to so I don't jump. I'm not big into scares, thrills and chills, not my thing. Wasn't raised that way. Don't do a whole lot of it here as an adult. But
Well, we're talking that it's going to be Ant-Man 2 will be the first competition, but do you think maybe M. Night Shyamalan and Dave Bautista might have a shot at this?
I mean, I think with the M. Night Shyamalan name, it has a puncher's chance.
Yeah.
You throw in Dave Bautista, it elevates it a little bit. I don't know that it elevates it a tremendous amount in height, but yeah, there's always a chance. That's why you play the games, right? Just
For
to see
Grant, you
what.
have part of fandom there too.
Well, there is some of that. One other thing we wanted to touch on before we left, and we won't go super long on, and that is they released some numbers this week. They released the top 15 streaming movies for 2022 and the top 15 streaming series for 2022. And I just want to talk about this really briefly. Talking about the movies, the top 15 movies, 10 of those movies belong to Disney Plus. Number 1 by a country mile, by like 16,000 minutes viewed, is Encanto, which is interesting because it didn't do well at the box office when it came out, at the very beginning of the COVID epidemic, but found tremendous life on Disney Plus and merchandising, man, as Yogurt would say from Spaceballs. It's grown into a tremendous hit. Not a box office hit, but with all the things around it, Encanto has become a really big hit.
We don't
Turning,
know.
yes, I know. I still don't get it, and I've seen the movie several times, and I'm just like, I don't know. It's not for me, shall we say? Turning Red was number two. Skip down to number four. Moana, number six. Hocus Pocus 2, which a lot of people were happy to see back. Lady Cephas was one of them. Frozen was at number eight. Luca, number nine. Zootopia 11. I'm a huge fan. I mark out for Zootopia so much. We need a second one. I don't know where it is. Coco was 12. The Eternals at 13.
Huh.
14. Frozen 2. And on the surface, this is great. That means overall, Disney Plus had the most minutes viewed in terms of streaming movies. But one thing I find interesting is one, two, let's see, one, nope, one, two of the movies were from 2021. So they're a year old, and all the rest of them are at least 2 years old, if not more. Going all the way back to Zootopia, which I think is actually the oldest movie on this list. And so I'll just ask you, Earl, real quickly. Um, is this a feather in Disney Plus's cap, or is this just an understanding that movie streaming, there's more of an interest in older stuff than some of
Well,
the current stuff?
here's a question for you. How many of those were live action?
Live action, there would have been one, two, three, and by the way, Netflix had the other five, so I'll count them. Four, five, 6 out of 15.
Okay. And how many of Disney's was live action?
One, two, two.
So look at those numbers. And so we had almost half of the streaming movie, 15, you said, or 20?
Top 15.
Okay, top almost half of the top 15 movies were live action. But with Disney, you just went from 50% almost to what? 15%?
About, yeah, roughly.
So I think that right there is a little telling, is the fact that their animation department, their cartoons, their CGI, if these things are where some of the strength is. Live action over the last few years is not holding its weight right now.
And the other thing is, these are not Pixar releases. These are Disney releases, but they're not. Yeah, Pixar doesn't really have much of a presence here, which is interesting because they were purchased by Disney back in the day and
Yep.
have been a huge performer for them, but not as much here. So it's interesting just to kind of look at that. And then there was one other here, and that is the most streamed TV shows. And just to kind of briefly go through this list here, according to the Nielsen ratings, Stranger Things dominated everything completely. I know there was a big push for Wednesday, but Wednesday only finished third. You had Stranger Things 1 with 52 billion minutes watched. The closest competition, Ozark, with 31.3 billion minutes viewed, excuse me. And then Wednesday drops all the way down to 18.8. So there's a significant gap between Stranger Things and Wednesday. And then you have Cobra Kai, Bridgerton, Virgin River. By the way, guilty pleasure. Just gonna say I really like that show. Dahmer, Love Is Blind, Inventing Anna, which comes from the creators of Killing Eve, The Crown, and then at number 11. So the top 10 is all Netflix. Number 11 is The Boys, which is on Amazon Prime Video. Then you have The Great British Baking Show, The Umbrella Academy, which we cover here on the show. The Last Kingdom, not a bad series as well. And then Rings of Power comes in at number 15 on Amazon Prime. That is your top 15 streaming programs. Unfortunately for Disney Plus, nowhere to be found. No Obi-Wan. We know that Miss Marvel was one of the lower received ones, even though it was one of the, I think, the best one, honestly, Marvel series they've done. That's not here. No Loki, no Moon Knight, no She-Hulk. So all the big things, quote, that they released, not on the top 15 at all.
No
Not,
Obi.
no
No.
Obi.
Well, Andor's newer, but
Right.
no Mandalorian.
Nope. Well, now the Mandalorian's been gone for what, a year and a half now?
Yeah, but uh, you know why who's number one? Why they're number one? Because when you go to watch it, you want to refresh. You go back and you're watching previous
Right.
seasons.
And that's
Uh,
what we did with the prior season. Yeah.
but so they're even though they may not be current, they may be a year old. They
Hmm.
should be able to, if they're these big hits like what we're being told, they should be able to put up some decent numbers. But all the ones you're talking about,
Hmm.
other than one, you've got Wednesday is number three. That's a new show. There's nothing else to go back to rewatch.
Right. It's just the 8 episodes. That's
Yeah,
all it is. And so you can binge that a couple of different times.
yeah. I mean, Ozark is season four with Bateman, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it's a nice a little interesting show. But I mean, all these shows, uh, are they all current or are they things that aren't being produced right now?
They are current shows that are airing new episodes.
And what does Disney Plus have airing new right now? What did they have airing new last week?
Uh, well, they have National Treasure, the spinoff from the movie franchise. They have Black Panther, Wakanda Forever,
We're not
which dropped yesterday.
so I would leave Panther alone right now. But I'm like, really, and National Treasure is still streaming right now.
It
I think
is.
they're halfway through.
Mhm.
Oh, before that was Andor, maybe
Maybe.
the Bad Batch, maybe.
Yes, you have let's see, what do you have in October? Werewolf by Night. You had She-Hulk before that. Obi-Wan. Well, you had She-Hulk, Miss Marvel. Oh, I'm going backwards. Obi-Wan.
Obi
Um,
Wan, summer wasn't it? Like late summer.
yeah, I think that was the same time Miss Marvel came out. They dropped, I believe, if I remember right, one dropped on Wednesday, one dropped on Friday. They dropped the same week, which was a very odd scheduling, I thought, but whatever. I'm not that smart.
In almost 9 months, six series dropped on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
And you look at the top numbers of Netflix, and you can say Wednesday is new. Uh, Stranger Things just dropped not that long ago. I mean, half of their shows that are on that list are like current.
Correct. Or coming back for another renewed for another season, like Wednesday, like Stranger Things. Yeah.
So I think that right there is very telling. You have Netflix, who even though they're killing a lot of stuff, people are still crying about Warrior Nun. I haven't watched season two yet, but season one, it was one of those where you watched it and you're like, yeah, we'll do one more. We'll do one more. But apparently
Right.
season two is amazing. But Netflix is cutting a lot of stuff, but they're still putting out content.
Mhm.
Disney Plus is not cutting any content because they would not have anything to come out if they cut content. So when
Well, I will point out to you that Nat Geo, which is under the Disney Plus umbrella, did drop Great Hippo Invasion.
so
I may have started watching it. That's all I can tell you right now.
but I mean, what separates Disney Plus from Netflix or some of the bigger ones is content.
Mhm.
They don't have nearly enough new content, just like it proved in the movies. You had stuff that was 10 years old. What was Zootopia? 2009?
Oh yeah, it's been at least a decade.
14 years.
Yeah. I didn't realize it
Why?
had been that long, but it still holds up, by the way.
I'm sure it was 2009. I could be wrong, but either way, Disney Plus just doesn't have the depth when it comes to the streaming that a lot of these other shows do. Will that Where is it going to hurt? Is it going to hurt the ones that are having so much content that they're potentially bleeding money, or is it going to be hurting the one that they're not spending all the money on the content, but because they're not spending money on content, is that going to hurt them because people aren't going to watch their stuff?
By the way, Zootopia 2016.
2016. So I was off by
2016.
I was
But
off my younger self.
you have other things that will be coming back this year too. You're going to have Manifest come back for its fifth and final season. 10 episodes. I'm a fan of it. We'll talk about it when it finally drops and see how the story ends. But you're right. It's a little disconcerting. And Bob Iger, who kind of came back after the coup to oust Bob Chapek at the Elton John concert in the middle of the night on a Sunday night, which is a story into of itself. Google it, enjoy it. We're not going to cover it. He's got an earnings call coming up. I
Yeah.
believe it's the 8th. That may be the most fun quarterly earnings call in the history of quarterly earnings calls. I will listen to it on Thursday. We'll try and talk about it a little bit on Midnight Magic Musings next week. We won't go heavy into it because I don't want to put anyone to sleep, including myself, nor the Earl. But there's probably going to be one or two very interesting things to come out of it, especially as they're kind of changing their projections for Disney Plus. But you can see this is why they're having so much trouble, why it's such tough sledding. Shout out to those in the ice storm right now, because they're not generating enough content to generate continual subscribers.
Yep.
And that's a challenge that they're going to have to address as time goes forward. All right, Earl. Well, that is everything I had on my list. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with the listeners and the viewers before we sign off for another episode of Midnight Magic Musings?
Honestly, I think we did pretty well. We touched on my biggest thing that I didn't think I was going to think about would be, and M. Night Shyamalan knock off Avatar 2 this weekend. And I didn't think anything about it until I saw the trailer right before we started. I was like, man, you know what? There is a movie before we get to Ant-Man that could maybe do it. It's a completely different genre. It's a return to M. Night Shyamalan. So that'll be interesting to see. Maybe the Lord Cephas will grace us with his presence on a Monday morning for a box office rundown and let us know.
If people want it, I'll give it to them. We can certainly do that as well. The good part about it is having quality movies, or quality, I guess, in the eye of the beholder, but enough big name movies at the theaters to give people a variety to get out and go to the theaters. Avatar has had a run of it, and good on them. 2 billion plus, probably going to land somewhere 2.4, 2.5 billion. That is fantastic and amazing at the same time.
Yep.
But there's not a lot of competition now that some's ratcheting up. It's nice to see big names on the marquee again. I look forward to seeing that because hopefully that will help out not only Hollywood as much, but the movie theaters who they rely on customers, and they rely on people going to concession stands and paying $37 for a 12-ounce Pepsi with no ice, and it's probably flat. But they rely on that kind of stuff. Not the kind of people who would go to Dollar Tree, pay, I don't know, $1.25 for a thing of candy and slide it into their purse. Never seen it done. Wouldn't encourage it, but I've heard of it.
You mean the dollar and quarter store?
It's basically developed into that. That is true. Although Dollar General does have a dollar section for those who care. And if you don't, I understand why you've already tuned out. But having said that, we're going to bring it to a close. Remember, tomorrow evening, Friday evening, we're going to have a show outlining our top 3 DC characters that we feel like need to be in either a movie or a streaming series, maybe an animation, maybe a game, maybe The Godfather. James Gunn will put it all together based on our recommendations. Who knows what may take place? That'll be dropping tomorrow. And then this Saturday night, we will have our NXT Vengeance Day post-game show, the Combat One wrestling program. The podcast is back for another week. We're going to watch it and we're going to talk about it on behalf of Combat One, on behalf of the Earl of Florida, who is gracious with his time. I am Lord Cephas. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this video out, click that notification bell. Help us get out to the masses, and we appreciate all of you, your support, your kindness, your comments. All of those things really do help in the YouTube algorithm, but more than that, they mean a lot to us personally, and we greatly appreciate it. So, Earl, I'll see you next week, and with that, we are out. So long, everybody.